The boardroom fell silent when the CEO calmly pushed the termination papers off the polished table and said she would rather lose her company than abandon the elderly janitor everyone else wanted to destroy. Investors stood, executives walked away, cameras outside captured every second, and within a single afternoon the woman who had built a billion-dollar corporation was stripped of her position, her reputation, and nearly every possession she had worked decades to earn. What nobody in that room knew was that the quiet single father holding a worn-out mop had been carrying a secret worth billions, and before the sun would set, every life in that building would change forever. If you believe kindness should never be punished, forgiveness is stronger than revenge, hope can rise from the darkest moments, and everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel. Every action helps our family and our community continue sharing emotional stories that remind us humanity still matters. The city of Ashford was filled with towering glass buildings that reflected bright morning sunlight across crowded streets, but none stood taller than the headquarters of Northbridge Innovations. The company had transformed medical technology, making its founder and chief executive, Meredith Caldwell, one of the most respected business leaders in the country. She had earned a reputation for discipline, intelligence, and fairness, though few people knew the personal loneliness hidden behind her calm smile. Years earlier she had buried both parents within months of each other, choosing work over grief because she believed success could silence pain. It never did. Her company grew into a global empire, yet every morning she still arrived before everyone else, searching for purpose beyond profits. Every day she noticed the same elderly janitor quietly polishing the marble entrance before employees arrived. His name was Graham Holloway, a widowed single father who had raised his daughter alone after losing his wife to illness when the little girl was only 4 years old. His daughter, Eliza, had grown into a compassionate elementary school teacher, but Graham continued working because he believed honest labor gave life dignity. He smiled at receptionists, remembered birthdays, helped nervous interns carry heavy boxes, and quietly repaired broken furniture without asking anyone for recognition. Most employees appreciated him, but a handful of ambitious executives viewed him as invisible. One bright morning, disaster struck. A confidential prototype vanished from the executive research floor. The invention represented years of work and billions of dollars in future contracts. Security footage showed only fragments because the cameras had briefly malfunctioned during scheduled maintenance. Fear spread through every department. Investors demanded immediate answers while reporters gathered outside the headquarters. Senior executives, desperate to protect themselves, searched for someone powerless enough to blame. Because Graham possessed a master key allowing him to clean every floor, suspicion landed squarely on his shoulders. Rumors spread through the offices faster than facts. By lunchtime, whispers had become accusations. Employees who had greeted him warmly only hours earlier now stepped aside as though he carried shame itself. Meredith refused to accept the accusations without evidence. She personally reviewed hours of surveillance, interviewed staff, and examined maintenance records. Every answer seemed to point toward Graham, yet something about his quiet dignity made her hesitate. She watched him comforting another frightened employee despite being the one under investigation. She saw no panic, only sadness that people who had known him for years could believe the worst so quickly. The board of directors demanded immediate action. They insisted firing Graham would reassure investors and calm public outrage. Several influential shareholders warned Meredith that protecting a janitor over corporate interests would destroy confidence in her leadership. Financial analysts predicted billions in losses if the controversy continued another day. Meredith faced the most difficult decision of her career. Everything she had built depended upon pleasing people whose only concern was money. Yet every instinct told her that sacrificing an innocent man would betray every value upon which the company had been founded. She stood before the board and declared that no employee, regardless of position, would be condemned without truth. Her refusal triggered outrage. Emergency votes were held. Investors withdrew support. Within hours she lost her position as chief executive. News stations described it as one of the fastest executive removals in corporate history. Meredith packed a single cardboard box containing family photographs, an old notebook from her first startup, and a faded employee identification badge she had kept since the company's beginning. As she walked through the lobby under the afternoon sunlight pouring through enormous windows, many workers lowered their eyes in embarrassment. Graham stepped forward, tears filling his weathered eyes, believing his existence had ruined her life. Meredith gently told him that losing wealth was painful, but losing integrity would have been far worse. She explained that companies could be rebuilt, while a person's conscience could not. Graham stood speechless, overwhelmed that someone with every reason to protect herself had chosen instead to defend someone everyone else had forgotten. The following morning, with the sun already high above the skyline, Meredith visited the modest neighborhood where Graham lived. She expected to find a struggling retiree barely surviving on wages. Instead, she discovered a tiny but beautifully maintained home filled with books, photographs, and carefully restored antiques. There was no luxury, only warmth created through decades of love and sacrifice. Over tea, Graham finally decided it was time to reveal the truth he had hidden for nearly 20 years. Long before becoming a janitor, Graham had been a brilliant engineer and entrepreneur. Together with two close friends, he had invented revolutionary medical imaging technology capable of detecting life-threatening diseases years earlier than existing equipment. Investors had offered enormous sums, but Graham refused to commercialize the invention before ensuring it would remain affordable for ordinary families. His partners disagreed. Greed divided them. Graham quietly walked away, selling his shares for almost nothing while unknowingly retaining ownership of a forgotten legal clause buried inside the original company agreement. Years passed. That small company evolved through acquisitions and mergers until its intellectual property became the hidden foundation beneath Northbridge Innovations. Unknown to everyone, the overlooked clause still granted Graham ownership rights worth several $billion. His lawyers had discovered the truth years earlier, but Graham refused to pursue the money because endless lawsuits would have destroyed thousands of jobs. He believed peace mattered more than fortune. Meredith listened in stunned silence. She realized the company that had abandoned her was unknowingly built upon Graham's forgotten invention. He had possessed the power to claim everything for years yet had chosen humility instead. She finally understood why his eyes carried such quiet wisdom. He had already experienced success, betrayal, heartbreak, and forgiveness long before anyone inside Northbridge knew his name. Just then Eliza returned home from school carrying handmade thank you cards from her students. She welcomed Meredith with genuine warmth, never mentioning billions or lawsuits. Instead, she proudly spoke about her father's kindness, explaining how he secretly paid struggling families grocery bills and repaired neighbors' homes without accepting payment. Meredith realized Graham's greatest wealth had never been financial. It had always been the lives he quietly changed. Meanwhile, inside Northbridge headquarters, investigators finally recovered deleted security files from an independent backup server. The missing footage clearly showed that the prototype had been stolen not by Graham but by the company's own chief financial officer, Preston Vance, who planned to sell the design to competitors before blaming the janitor. The evidence shocked investigators. Preston was arrested before leaving the city, and every accusation against Graham collapsed within hours. Public opinion changed almost instantly. News headlines that had once condemned the elderly janitor now celebrated his innocence. Yet Meredith remained unemployed, her life's work taken from her because she had chosen compassion over convenience. Then Graham made a decision that astonished even his daughter. He instructed his legal team to activate the forgotten ownership clause. Rather than demanding revenge, he offered Northbridge one extraordinary condition. He would transfer every ownership right back to the company if Meredith were restored as chief executive and the corporation committed a substantial portion of future profits to affordable healthcare, employee education, and assistance programs for single parents struggling to raise children alone. Lawyers called the proposal unprecedented. Financial experts described it as impossible generosity. The board, facing overwhelming legal pressure and public outrage, unanimously accepted every condition. Only days later, beneath another bright afternoon sky, Meredith walked back through the same front entrance where she had carried her lonely cardboard box. This time hundreds of employees stood waiting. There were no expensive celebrations, no dramatic speeches prepared by public relations teams, only sincere applause from people who had finally understood the price of integrity. Meredith's first official act after returning was to abolish executive privileges that separated leaders from employees. She introduced open-door policies, anonymous ethics reporting, educational scholarships, expanded family leave, and emergency assistance funds. Every employee, from executives to cleaners, would now eat in the same cafeteria and attend the same monthly meetings because dignity, she believed, should never depend on a job title. Graham declined every luxurious office offered to him. Instead, he requested one simple privilege. He wanted to continue working several mornings each week as the building's janitor. When employees asked why someone worth billions would still push a cleaning cart through polished hallways, he smiled gently and explained that honest work had carried him through grief, raised his daughter, and kept his heart humble. Wealth could change a bank account, but it should never change character. Months later, the company unveiled a medical foundation bearing no executive's name. Instead, it honored ordinary caregivers, teachers, cleaners, nurses, mechanics, and single parents whose sacrifices often went unnoticed. Thousands of families received life-saving treatment because one man had valued compassion over revenge and one woman had refused to abandon an innocent employee. Meredith often reflected that the greatest investment she had ever made was not in technology, buildings, or stock markets. It had been the decision to trust her conscience when every logical calculation suggested she should do the opposite. Graham reflected that kindness always carries hidden rewards, though rarely in the way people expect. Eliza watched children whose parents received affordable treatment laugh freely in school playgrounds, realizing her father's quiet choices had reached lives he would never even meet. Before this story ends, we would love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment sharing whether you believe integrity is worth protecting even when it costs everything, or tell us about a moment when someone's kindness changed your life forever. As another bright afternoon settled gently across the city, Graham finished polishing the front entrance one final time before retirement. The marble reflected sunlight so clearly that every person entering the building could see their own reflection. Meredith stood nearby, understanding that the polished floor represented something much greater than cleanliness. It reminded everyone who crossed it that character shines brightest after being tested. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Thank you for being part of our family and our community, where every story reminds us that true wealth is measured not by what we keep, but by the lives we choose to lift when the world tells us to look away. If you'd like, I can also.